What's up, everybody? Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the All In podcast. I am one of your co-hosts, Eli Cooper, and I'm joined by my guy, Mike Badzik. How's it going, bro?
It's going great. What's going on, man? This is kind of awesome. Like, we're kind of in this unexpected. I was not actually prepared for this whirlwind of sports right now. So we've got March Madness, which has actually not disappointed at all. I'd say it's been really fun so far. We've got NBA trade deadline pushing down to the playoffs in that sport. And then, these two are close to my heart, probably closer than yours. But opening day is in 1 week from today. So I'm kind of very giddy about that. You guys know I love my baseball. And the Masters at Augusta National is in 2 weeks from now. And it's actually been a great PGA Tour so far this season. We've had some big named winners almost every week. So kind of unexpected frenzy of sports, but I'm loving it.
Yeah, man, it's been a pretty exciting week or two of sports and some exciting things coming up as well. And not to mention the women's tournament's going on right now. They just finished their first two rounds. Yeah. The NCAA somehow, some way found enough space to finally get them a weight room so they can work out there. I'm not sure how they did it, but big ups to them.
It got finished. It was finished.
Right. So they finally got their weight room and their tournament is well underway. And I'll tell you what, we're not gonna talk about the women's tournament today, but if you have not watched Paige Beckers from UConn, highly recommend. 10 out of 10. That girl can play. She is a bucket. So highly recommend. Check out the women's tournament. They actually have a big matchup coming out with Iowa this Saturday at 1. And Iowa has a freshman stud who led the Big Ten in scoring this year. So women's basketball on the rise, and their tournament was looking pretty fun. But with the crazy trade deadline that we had today, that's what we're going to get into. We're even going to give you guys our Sweet 16 and on picks for the men's tournament as well. We're going to talk about Steve Kerr's comments, and then we're also going to talk about Draymond calling himself the best defensive player ever. So we're going to address that claim. Before we get into all that, if you guys are watching on our YouTube channel, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Thank you guys for tuning in to our live episode here today. If you're listening on the audio platform, make sure you're subscribing to us there as well. Make sure you leave a rating, comments, things like that, reviews. All those things help us promote the podcast and enhance the podcast. So thank you guys for your feedback and tuning in today. For those of you watching on Facebook, thank you for showing us some love. Make sure you head over to our page, like our page, and follow our page. And then also you can find the link to our YouTube channel, things like that. Subscribe to us on there as well. So 3 p.m. today, the NBA trade deadline finished and it went out with a bang. And I asked this question on Twitter, and Mike, you're not on Twitter anymore, so I'll ask you.
Okay.
Why is the NBA trade deadline, and free agency for that matter, so much better than everybody else's? Like what separates the NBA's trade deadline and free agency from everyone else's?
Well, actually I'm a little bit biased here, and I would say MLB trade deadline can approach the level of excitement as far as deadline deals. We definitely don't see this from the NFL.
I would agree with
that. And the reason I think for the NBA especially is also like we're just so invested in these players, number one.
True.
And these players are way more important. So we've joked before about even NFL free agency going on right now. We'll probably talk about that at some point. But we're not talking about that because, there's a lot of guys on a football team. And the NBA has a way of this player maneuvering, shuffling. It's just way more fun. It's way easier to envision ourselves as an NBA GM than an NFL GM because there isn't as many moving pieces, but the pieces that do move can be consequential. So it's a lot more fun. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah, that's true. And I also think, there's so much more activity that goes on in NBA trade deadlines and than anyone else's other than, like you said, the MLB. I think the other thing is that so many times you see guys in contract years because there's no franchise tag like there is in the NFL, things like that. Guys who are in contract years in the NBA teams wanting to get the maximum amount of value for those guys. is what typically causes all the movement that we end up seeing on trade deadline day. And the Magic got us started today, man. They got us started with a fire sale. Like they were just like, "Hey, come get our guys. We're terrible this year. It's time to hit. It's time to hit restart." Evan Fournier went to the Celtics for 2 second-round picks, and a player ended up getting exchanged in that deal. We found out later on, which I'll have to pull back up. But then, but first, before he went, Nikola Vucevic went to the Chicago Bulls. Wendell Carter Jr. And a couple of other picks and players were involved in that deal going back to Orlando. But this marks the first time I heard this on Around the Horn. It may or may not be true, so don't fact check me. Yeah. But this is the first time the Bulls have had a center average 24 and 12 per game like Nikola Vucevic is averaging right now. And if you think about it, there aren't many candidates for someone to put up in Bulls history that would have put up those kind of numbers. So it makes sense, right? I think the only other person who would have been close was like Artis Gilmore or something like that.
Okay.
So pretty big deal. And now the Bulls have 2 all-star players. What do you think about the Bulls making this move for Nikola Vucevic? Is this enough to make them a little bit, I don't want to say a threat in the East, because they're certainly not, but like this is kind of a progression for them, right? This gives them another building block.
Well, let me just say this before I even say anything about, do I think it makes them like a contender, or does it make them like, first of all, I just want to say, like, I love it, right? I love this idea where you have a team who is in the, right now they're in that 7 to 10 seed range, which would put them in a playing game. Look at their team and say, we have a real chance to make the playoffs this year. Like, let's actually go for it. Instead of being a team that says, well, it actually probably, we'll lose in the first round anyway. It's probably better to lose more games and then get a higher pick. Instead, they looked at it and said, no, let's go for it. And I think we've talked about this before, not only with NBA teams, but also with NFL teams, especially when you have a historic franchise like this who looks at it and says, well, we haven't been to the playoffs in a while. Let's give our fans something to get excited about and kind of re-energize the organization. So I think that's what they're doing here. They're saying, we were in that. I think right now they're the 10 seed, could be the 9 seed maybe. And they're now the 10 seed. So I think they look at it and they say, we're probably, looking good for that 7 to 10 range, playing a playing game, but that's not good enough for us. And I just want to say, I love that, for any franchise who hasn't been there in a while and is close, make the move and go for it. Your fans will thank you for it. And I'm glad that they did. Now, do I think this move, launches them into the level of those top 3 teams in the East when we're talking about the Nets, the Bucks, and the Sixers? No, it doesn't. And I don't think that there's any move they could have made, or any multiple moves that they could have made to put them in that class. Now, I think when you look at the rest of the East, really from that 4 seed, so the 4 seed to the 10 seed now already is only separated by 3 games. And I think the Bulls, when you look at the teams in that range, this puts their roster over a lot of those other teams. You keep a Zach LaVine and put him with a Vucevic. And listen, we've talked about LaVine. I haven't always been the biggest fan. He is a bad team, good stats guy a lot of the time for me. But you can't deny the shot making has been there. And the shot making down the stretch, too, some of his clutch numbers have been really good. And you put him with Vucevic, and you look at that like a pick and pop situation, you low post, and some of the other athletes that they have, if they could work around someone like Vucevic in the block, I think it could bode well for them. I still think they're a first round exit, probably, unless they get as high as the 5 seed. If they get as high as the 5 seed, and they're playing the Hornets, who knows who sneaks up in that 4 seed? It's probably going to end up being the Heat, and if it's the Heat, I think they lose also. So I think they're still a first round exit. And the last piece of this, well, actually, before I talk about, do I think they gave up too much? Why don't you give your thoughts? Do you think that they climb up higher than that?
I don't see them really anywhere higher than the 6 seed, because Miami got better today, I think, which we'll talk about them. The Knicks are just playing well. So I do like the Knicks. I think Charlotte does start to bottom out with LaMelo being out for the next few weeks. And, Boston's been incredibly underwhelming this year, but like I'm still taking the Celtics over this Bulls team. So
Easily.
I say they probably don't get any higher than the 6th seed. But I love the trade. I do. I agree with you wholeheartedly. That it's great to see a team that in this situation trying to improve. Like the Bulls have every reason to actually trade Zach LaVine and commit even more to the rebuild that they're already going through, right? Like
Yes.
getting him out of that, like they could have capitalized on the numbers that he's putting up and sold him to the highest bidder. And instead they're like, dude, we're gonna get you another piece. We're gonna try to make this thing work for you. They were even talking about moving Lauri Markkanen. It looks like he's going to stay in Chicago and they'll deal with his restricted free agency this summer. But if you look at this Bulls team, you've got Kobe White, who's been inconsistent for them. But yeah, I love Kobe White, but he's got to find some consistency. He ended last year strong, but has not been good this year. Satoransky has been solid for them. They've got Patrick Williams, who I really like as a 3-and-D guy.
Very
Obviously,
much like Patrick Williams.
He's young, so his impact won't be felt quite yet, but he's going to develop into a really good 3-and-D player. Yeah. I like Lauri Markkanen. At least on the offensive end, I think he's a solid stretch 4, possible stretch 5 in certain lineups. Doesn't really play any defense, and that's his biggest issue. But him, and then you got Vucevic at the 5. Like those are all solid, good players. To make up a nice starting 5 and 6th man kind of situation that you have there in Chicago. It's a lot better than what they had before. So I am happy to see them, kind of buying in here. I think it makes them more attractive in free agency.
Yes.
And I think that's the biggest reason that you make this move is not necessarily for this year, but if you want to land free agents, you have to at least look like you're trying to get better. And that's certainly what they're doing here. So if they, renounce Markkanen, I don't know what the cap space or situation, it's going to be pretty good, I would assume. The only big money player that they're tied up to is LaVine. Now that they've gotten rid of Otto Porter Jr., so they should have a decent cap situation and position themselves, to round out this roster a little bit better in free agency. And I think that's where the Bulls really kind of won out with this move.
Yeah. I think now I will say, because I think we should applaud the move and we should say good for the Bulls. I think they gave up a lot for Vucevic, a guy who probably takes them from a 9 seed to a 7 or a 6 seed max, right? So, and maybe I'm higher on Wendell Carter. I like Wendell Carter personally. I actually think that he can be an impact player on a good team. He's got really great feet and athletic ability. Hasn't been there. And I think, also, I think there is this thing now where it's really easy for media people to say, oh, I really like this young center. I like this young center. And then when it doesn't pan out, you're just like, well, he didn't get the post touches that he needed to. And it's like, well, guess what? No team gives anybody post touches. So right. We just kind of have to start factoring that in. But I actually do like Wendell Carter. So I think they gave up a lot for him, which shows the commitment. There was talks that they were going to be in the Lonzo market. That didn't end up happening. But it shows that they're at least going for it.
Yeah, and actually, I really would have liked Lonzo as a fit for them. I don't know what, because Markkanen was actually involved in that deal for Lonzo. I don't know what fell through there. Who, I'm sure we'll get more details on that. But I actually think Lonzo, of all the places that he was rumored to go to, Chicago would have been the best fit because he plays defense. Yeah. And if you're going to have Zach LaVine on the floor, you need another guard that's going to defend. They got another wing who can defend with Patrick Williams, but you need another backcourt guy who can defend.
Right.
Which maybe that turns into Kobe White. I don't know, but it's definitely Lonzo right now. So I really like that move for the Bulls. And like you said, I think the Magic got quite a bit back for a 30-year-old center who, granted, is an all-star, but like an all-star reserve. You know what I mean? And like a fringe all-star. So like, a young Wendell Carter Jr., who I also like as well. I think he's a good rotational big and a starter on some teams, in my opinion, just because he's versatile defensively. They got back 2 first-round picks, which is pretty significant. They got Otto Porter Jr. and like long-term, that probably doesn't do anything for them he probably heads into free agency this summer anyway. So you got an expiring contract back in the deal. So that's a bonus in regards to cap space. So yeah, I thought the Magic got back as much as they possibly could. And it's funny because 2 minutes before Woj announced that the trade, he said that the Magic are listening to offers, but they're going to have to be blown away in order to trade him. And then like 2 minutes later, he announces the trade. And I'm like, okay, well, yeah, they definitely got blown away. This is as good of a deal that you were going to get for him.
Or they knew, or somebody in the Magic organization knew Woj real well and said, "Hey, can you put this out there?" And then we get a fire offer.
Exactly. And that offer came through like minutes after he tweeted that. So I thought that was pretty funny. But Orlando was not done there.
Mm-hmm.
The guy who everyone was expected to be moved today was Aaron Gordon. And there were a lot of rumored destinations. And then out of the blue, the Denver Nuggets swoop in and make a deal for Aaron Gordon. So he's headed to Denver. And Denver sent quite a bit back for him. It was Aaron Gordon and Gary Clark went to Denver. And the Magic got back Gary Harris, RJ Hampton, and a protected 2025 first-round pick back for Aaron Gordon. Thoughts on this trade?
Yeah, so I think over the last couple of days, Aaron Gordon's probably became one of the most overrated players in the country because we've been talking about him so much. However, I do think he does help this Denver team. I like this fit a lot. Of all of the places he could have gone, this is probably one of the best fits where he's not going to be asked to be the scoring ball handler type. And he can kind of work off of Jokic. You start to imagine, Jokic at the high post and Gordon cutting backdoor baseline. You can think about how he fits in with a big guy with the passing ability of a Jokic, and a guard who can handle the ball and shoot like Jamal Murray. I think he fits in. He's probably, if you really want to build a championship type team, Aaron Gordon's probably like a fourth guy on that team. He's probably not a third guy even. He's more like a fourth guy who's gonna just do the right things on offense. I think that a lot of teams could have used Aaron Gordon. I think Portland really could have used Aaron Gordon because of he also has this ability to be switchable on defense. Where this is why I think Portland really should have gone after him because they have trouble with the switchability with CJ and Dame, and they could have added him who can really switch on the guards and not have an issue, and he's big enough to switch with almost any duo that you could throw at them. So I think that helps Denver, and you give up, Gary Harris, who is known for his defense. You bring Aaron Gordon, adds more size. It'll be interesting to see who the closing five for them is because if Michael Porter Jr. is included in that, and you think you have Michael Porter Jr., Aaron Gordon, and Jokic as your forwards, as your front court there, that could be pretty dangerous, right? You have Gordon to kind of cover some of that defensive liability that Porter Jr. Presents, and that also Jokic, who Jokic has the ability to guard the rim. He probably shouldn't be doing that as much as he is. They probably shouldn't be asking him to do that as much as he is. So I think this is great for Denver. I think if they were looking for a piece to add, he probably was the best one they could have other than Lowry. And for the Magic, they get RJ Hampton back, who is this kind of a big unknown right now. We still don't really know what to think of RJ Hampton because he hasn't been able to show much in Denver, but they're a good team. And we're gonna talk about MVP stuff later, so we're gonna talk about Jokic later. But Denver is kind of ascending, and I think Aaron Gordon. You look at this and you look at the West, and you say, do we really trust the Jazz to do something? The Lakers have these injuries. The Clippers have proven, Denver. I don't think they're scared of the Clippers based on last year, right? Right. I think Denver is looking at this saying, why can't we make the finals?
Right. Yeah. I thought this was a brilliant trade for Denver. I really do. I thought they weren't even one of the teams that were talked about destinations up until today, and they just kind of came out of nowhere and didn't give up much for him.
Right.
I think RJ Hampton's a small price to pay for a guy who's going to start for you now at that 4 spot. I think he's certainly a starter for them. And like you said, I think the biggest thing that he brings to the Nuggets is that front court defense. and the ability to kind of hide someone like Michael Porter Jr.
Yeah.
Or, for example, when you're playing, they played obviously they played the Lakers last year. They did not have two guys. Well, they didn't have one guy who could defend LeBron, and they probably still don't. But like Aaron Gordon gives you a much better chance at guarding LeBron than anyone else that they had on their roster did. And then, you kind of you do what you can with AD. But yeah, I think a front court, a trio of Michael Porter Jr., Aaron Gordon, and Nikola Vucevic, they fit well. Aaron Gordon shoots the ball well, so he won't hurt the spacing. He's a 39% 3-point shooter this year, I believe, or 37% 3-point shooter this year. So he can knock shots down. And if you don't ask him to be your best player, he's actually really good. Like you said, I think he's really good as your fourth option. Someone who can give you 14 and 7 a game. I don't know what more you could ask for out of a fourth option. Other than for him to play defense, which he'll do. So he gives them some athleticism, some defense, some shot making as far as being able to space the floor. I love the fit. My biggest question then is going to be who replaces Gary Harris in the backcourt?
Yeah.
Is it Monte Morris? I'm not sure if Will Barton stayed there today. I thought he might have been included with a third team in this deal. I haven't seen any official reports on that.
I don't know. I thought he stayed.
I thought he stayed too. I saw some rumors that he might have been going somewhere to a third team, but I didn't see anything official about him leaving. So maybe Will Barton, but your backcourt defensively still isn't great there. That's probably their biggest concern, and maybe something they try to address in the buyout market here, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But yeah, the Nuggets got better with this trade. In my opinion. And again, the Magic got back some quality pieces. Like you said, RJ Hampton is a high upside guy. Like the kid has a lot of talent. There's no denying that. Gary Harris is a very good two-way player. Maybe that 2025 first round pick ends up being something, who knows? But that's a lot back for a guy who made it clear that he wanted out.
Yeah, the Magic really, they should be in the Cade sweepstakes. And I think this is probably them doing that. This is probably them saying, okay, we tried this rebuild. It's time to rebuild our rebuild. It didn't work. So they're sellers.
And I think the best thing is that they have, let's say they don't, get the lottery luck that they wanted. They have the pieces to move up. You still have Cole Anthony. You still have RJ Hampton. You have Markelle Fultz. You have Wendell Carter Jr. now. And you have multiple picks. So you have the assets to move up if you don't quite get the lottery luck that you're looking for. So we'll talk about winners and losers later, but preliminary readings have Orlando as a winner for me today.
Yeah, I mean, if nothing else, so we're talking about Orlando for an extensive amount of time here.
Yeah. Yeah, this is probably the longest that we'll ever talk about Orlando. So let's move on from these guys and talk about your team.
Yeah.
The Toronto Raptors, who have underachieved to say the least this year. And they made some moves today.
Yeah.
The biggest one that everyone was talking about was Kyle Lowry. He stays put, though. And the Raptors trade Norman Powell. He ends up going to the Blazers for Gary Trent Jr. and Rodney Hood. So first off, how are you feeling about Norman Powell leaving?
Yeah. I mean, it's confusing because, we talked about the Magic doing the fire sale, and it really seemed like the Raptors were going to be doing a fire sale, right? Norman Powell gets moved kind of early in the day. Matt Thomas ends up getting moved. Terrence Davis ends up getting moved, and you're kind of looking at it okay, as a Raptors fan, I'm looking at it I get it. We're rebuilding. I get it. It's over. It was a good run. Now it's time to scrap this. Where's Kyle going? And the trade never came. And you think, I guess there was talks about a lot of teams. I know Philly, there was a ton of talks. Did it come down to not wanting to put Maxey in the deal? I don't know. We don't know yet. But it's surprising, because kind of now the Raptors, what's the goal here? Are we trying to make this 7-10 play-in game? I think I actually do think with this roster we still have that probably would happen. I think we would make that. But then, looking on a futuristic outlook, what is the goal of this roster? Because now, you're running out of time to move Lowry and get anything back. I think you could have got a lot back for Lowry if you moved him at this deadline here, because you still got next year control, I believe.
Yep.
Now, as a sentimental fan, I feel happy that they didn't trade Kyle Lowry. Never trade Kyle Lowry. Why would you trade Kyle Lowry? He's a winner. He's a dog. He's a champion.
Best Raptor in history, right?
Greatest Raptor in history. You never want to trade the greatest player in your franchise's history. I just think it didn't make a ton of sense with the other moves they made.
Yeah, I agree. I thought they were asking for a lot for a 35-year-old. No disrespect, but a chunky 35-year-old point guard.
Chunky.
Like
who's he makes winning plays.
Who has 1 year, but he has 1 year left on his deal though, and you don't even know that you're getting this guy long term. I think the only team who could pretty confidently could have said that they were going to sign Kyle Lowry long term was the Sixers, and because that's his hometown,
right.
And even if the Sixers did want to sign him long term, his asking price might be more than what anyone wants to pay a 35-year-old. At least in my opinion, I think it would have been. I don't know what he was going to ask for, but I would assume it's going to be 15 to 20 mil, right?
Well, yeah, and you're giving up, and that's the thing. It's probably Sixers probably didn't want to give up Maxey plus picks for half of a season. And Mike, you almost cried today. Yeah, maybe. I don't know if I would have been crying. I think I actually probably, would have been happy. We've seen this over and over again in sports, right? And the guy who's been with the franchise a long time, hey, I like you guys. I don't want you to get nothing for me. Try to work out a deal. I'll go to these teams. Let's do that. And whoever was making those deals didn't offer enough. I think Philly probably looked at it and they said, George Hill, Daryl Morey put on his mathematics hat and did all the problems and did the math. And he thought in his head that Kyle Lowry as an upgrade opposed to a George Hill, who they did get, isn't enough to give up all of these picks plus Maxey, right? And so they decided to sit back and not do anything. So I actually think it's a little bit disappointing that they didn't move Lowry, unfortunately.
Yeah, I was incredibly happy as a Sixers fan that we did not give up that much. I wanted Kyle Lowry. I did not want him at the price, and they were talking Maxey and Thibault and 2 first-round picks, and I'm just like, dude, for a 35-year-old, no, thank you. I'm sorry, I don't know that it could have been. I had the same feelings about James Harden. The Rockets wanted too much for James Harden, in my opinion. I was happy we didn't pull the trigger on that trade either. And a lot of Sixers fans, really wanted both of those moves to go through. But ultimately, the prices that I was seeing for both of those players were way too high. And we'll get into Houston a little bit later. But and in my opinion, I think the Raptors asked for too much from pretty much every team that they talked to for Kyle Lowry. I think, and it kind of tells me that they didn't really want to trade him in the first place. And maybe they want him to retire in Toronto. We could possibly see him resign, as they didn't, like you said, they didn't have the fire sale that we thought they were going to have. I don't know how much Kyle Lowry values chasing another championship, but if he wanted to retire a Raptor, I think he still has that opportunity while not playing horrendous basketball.
Yeah, and also I think the Raptors might, you might look at this if you're Masai Ujiri and say, well, this is a weird season. We're playing in Tampa Bay. We're not as bad as this season is making us look. We're not as bad as what our record shows right now. And maybe, they make the Norman Powell deal. He's a guy that you're definitely probably going to lose, right? Because he's going to sign a big deal somewhere. Yeah. Some type of Chandler Parsons type deal where maybe he's not that good, but he gets a big deal. We've seen it a million times with wings. But also, I think if you're Masai Ujiri, you can say, we can kind of hedge our bets a little bit, trade Norman Powell. You trade him, but really you trade him for Gary Trent Jr. and Rodney Hood, who really, I think if you put them together, they almost make a Norman Powell with the 3-point shooting ability mixed with a little bit of defense.
Right.
I think Norman can score at a more prolific level. He's a guy who can come in and give you 20 off the bench in the snap of fingers. But you kind of hedge your bets with that trade, and you say, you know what? Let's try to retool. Next year, we keep Lowry. We keep Siakam. There's no reason we can't be a top 5 seed in the East again if we hang on to these dudes and add a few pieces. And maybe you just hedge your bets and do the Norman Powell deal just in case.
Yeah, agreed. So before we move on from the Raptors to my beloved Sixers, why don't you tell Portland fans what they're getting in Norman Powell? Because I had some Portland fans, and actually they're Melo fans, but they're Portland fans now because he's there, and they felt that they gave up too much for Norman Powell.
What? You didn't really give up much though, right? I mean, you gave up 2 players who are bench players for you. I mean, Gary Trent Jr., yes, he can shoot. Listen, Norman Powell is really good. There were times this year where he was basically carrying the offense. When it would come to a stalemate, he would be the only guy out there attempting to get buckets. He's a slasher, really great athlete, and he plays good defense, right? So he's up to 20 points a game this year. Kind of has taken a leap the last 2 seasons, ever since the championship, and really in the playoffs of that championship run is when he kind of landed on the scene as a very good bench guy, and he's kind of ascended to where now he's, he probably was the 3rd best player on this team this year. He might have been the 2nd best player if you look at how Siakam and Van Vliet have been playing. It's not great. So I think it's great for Portland. It's a no-brainer deal for Portland. It's a no-brainer deal. You have to do it because, Rodney Hood and Gary Trent Jr. Gary Trent Jr. is a total liability on defense to a point where when you have him out there with Dame and CJ, it becomes very difficult to get any amount of stops. And ultimately that was their demise last year once they started playing the Lakers and a good team. They could not get any stops. And Rodney Hood, who has had bright moments for the Blazers, he's not Norman Powell in any sense. I mean, Norman Powell can do things offensively where you can say, okay, Dame and CJ, get your rest. Norman Powell can carry the load for the next 6 minutes, and we'll be okay at the end of it, right? Yep. You couldn't do that with Rodney Hood. You couldn't do that with Gary Trent Jr. And, he's the guy who's been there before. And I think actually it makes a lot of sense for Portland.
I agree. I think this was a great move for Portland. I think he's a great fit for them as well, whether he starts or comes off the bench. For them, I think him as a starter is kind of a small forward, but I think he gives them more defense than Gary Trent Jr., who plays hard defensively, but like it gets baked. If we're being quite honest, like when they put him on the other team's best players, he's getting torched. So I don't think that's the case for Norman Powell. Even he's not a lockdown defender, but he's certainly better than Gary Trent Jr. He's a better shooter than both of them. I think he's shooting something ridiculous, like 44 to 46% from 3 this year, something crazy
44.
like that.
He's at 44 right now.
Yeah, 44. Yeah, it's like 3rd best in the league.
Yeah.
On a team that has Dame and CJ, you throw Norman Powell into that mix. That's a scary trio right there when they're on the court together, like they will be at times. And he's not a guy who needs the ball to score. He can play off the catch and shoot. He can move without the basketball. And then, like you said, when you do need him to score with the ball in his hands, he can do that too.
Yeah, and you're right about he does not need the ball. He's learned to play when he's played with guys like Kawhi and Kyle and Fred. He's learned to play without the ball, and to an effect where he's actually a very heady player. Coming from Nick Nurse, where I think he can complement Dame and CJ. I still think Aaron Gordon might have been a better pickup for them because of the defense.
Yeah.
But Norman Powell's definitely an upgrade.
Agreed. So let's talk about my team, the Philadelphia 76ers, who opted not to trade for Kyle Lowry and instead got George Hill for a bag of chips. I'm incredibly happy about the move.
Yeah.
We capitalized on Tony Bradley's solid play recently with Joel Embiid being out, and we flip him and Terrence Ferguson for a veteran point guard off the bench that we desperately needed. So I'm happy with the deal. I think this George Hill was the next best option as far as guards that were available at the trade deadline.
Yeah.
And he came at a much cheaper price for the Sixers. So I was happy with the deal. What do you think George Hill gives this Sixers team? How much does he elevate the team going into the postseason?
Well, I know this is your boy, but I'm going to say he's not Shake Milton, right? So he's a steady hand, though. He's a guy who can control tempo when things get out of control, and who has developed into a really great shooter. So last year in Milwaukee, whenever he was playing with a really good team, he hits the open shots. He's been in a ton of big games, even back to his San Antonio and then Indiana days. He's been in Cleveland. He's been in a ton of big games. So I think he helps you even from that perspective to where, like, you know, and we've talked about this Philly team for a year now, and we've talked about how the past couple of years it always comes down in the playoffs. There's something missing with the fortitude of that team. He helps with that, and he helps bring a level hand. He helps be a solid point guard option. I actually think if you could work out a way to get Joel and him together, even more so than you have Ben and Joel together. And I'm not saying Ben should play less minutes than George Hill, because he definitely should not. Right. But having that time for Joel to just really feast and have a guy like George Hill with him, I think that's going to be huge. And even like you look at this team, what they've been able to do without these guys is actually insane.
Yeah.
It's the defense, really. Like, I think you probably would agree. Like, the defense has just been unreal, even without Ben Simmons and Joel, who are such defensive stoppers. The defense has been so unreal. So, interested to hear your thoughts, though.
Yeah, and I echo all the things you just said about George Hill offensively, and he also defends. And I think that's the biggest thing that he brings as to our guard unit is another defender. Because as much as I love Seth Curry, he's not a defender, right? Yeah. Shake Milton can't play defense. So, like, at least not to the level of George Hill. George Hill's a solid perimeter defender. So I think George Hill is actually kind of like the perfect complement to Ben and Joel when he's going to be on the floor. You can stagger Ben and Joel's minutes with him a little bit better, and he'll fit either on or off the ball with both of them. So I think that was a great pickup for the Sixers. And now we're looking at a bench with George Hill, Shake Milton, Matisse. Mike Scott is at the 4 right now. I'm certain they'll be addressing that at the buyout market. Right. But then Dwight anchoring the defense on our bench unit at the 5. He's been solid in his minutes like he was for the Lakers last year. So I think that gives us a really strong bench. And I think the only way we really could compete with the Nets was to have a deeper team than that. Yeah. And I think it's safe to say that we do, in fact, have the deeper team after adding George Hill. And, I've heard that Jabari Parker is going to be waived by the Kings. He might be a power forward upgrade off the bench, to take some pressure off of or to, give us some front court depth or someone of that nature. LaMarcus Aldridge was bought out today, but we'll talk about the buyout market a little bit later.
Sure.
But if we can address that backup power forward spot in the buyout market, I think the Sixers will have enough to compete with the Nets in the conference finals.
Yeah, I think that they can certainly get there. I think that there are moves that, just looking at it on the surface, doesn't mean as much as it will actually mean. And I think this is a move that we're going to look back on, hopefully, if things play out the way we think they can, that we're going to look back on and say that move was huge for this team to get a guy like that from a leadership perspective, the things that don't go into the box score, that the thing the nerds don't see. We're going to look back and say this helped them in a way that we couldn't actually define, and it was huge for them. Hopefully, at least for your sake.
Agreed. So good pickup for the Sixers. Another team that was in the running for Kyle Lowry and ultimately opted not to trade for him was the Miami Heat. It looked like they were putting together the best package, and it sounds like Tyler Herro was the deal breaker. They were willing to give up Duncan Robinson, but not Tyler Herro in this deal. So instead, they pivoted and traded for Victor Oladipo,
Yeah.
who has had some injury problems over the last few years, but a very talented player. He's averaging 20 a game this year, albeit on two not great teams, and shooting 42% while doing it, so not super efficient. But Oladipo heads to Miami, and they really didn't give up anything for him. They sent back Avery Bradley and Kelly Olynyk,
Right.
which Kelly Olynyk is a significant loss for them. I think they liked him as a change of pace, stretch five.
I don't think they liked him anymore, but
yeah, I mean, but like he was serviceable, right? Like
wow.
he was solid.
Yeah.
In that case, so he was like a solid, serviceable stretch five for them.
Yeah.
But I think in this case, he's a very small price to pay for someone who has the upside of Victor Oladipo here, right?
Oh, absolutely. Oladipo, I've always been a fan of Oladipo since the Indiana days. I think he's a very heady player, and I think that he'll fit in with this, quote unquote, heat culture. Always gets talked about the heat culture.
Yeah.
I think he fits in with this, right? A guy who can turn it up on defense at times from an athletic level, right? He actually reminds me of Jimmy Butler in many ways. From being like, what his persona was in college and how that translated to the pros.
Mm-hmm.
At the beginning of this year, when Indiana had Sabonis, Brogdon, and Oladipo, they were pretty good. They were towards the top of the Eastern Conference with those three, and Oladipo was playing his role. He wasn't trying to be the best guy, even though he might have been with those three, even though I think Sabonis probably is. I think he's a guy who can come in and fit on a good team. I don't think he's going to be there long term. He's probably going to be a rental for this year, and then someone's going to give him more money than he's probably worth. But I think if he comes in and he understands, he doesn't need to be the best player on this team. He just needs to fit in with this culture, and really what that means is play tough defense. I think he's actually a very serviceable piece, especially in the playoffs.
Yeah, I agree, and it's mostly because he's a two-way player, and that's actually something that I think they kind of lacked in their backcourt. If you ask me, like, don't get me wrong, I love Tyler Herro and Duncan Robinson. Those guys can't defend.
Yeah.
And I think this actually takes a lot of pressure off of them to have to do so. So I think he's actually a starter on this team. I think you put Jimmy at the 3. I think you get Dragic back healthy. He probably starts for them at the point. You go Oladipo at the 2, Jimmy Butler at the 3. Not sure what they do. They still have Jay Crowder, right?
Yes.
So
no, he's with Phoenix.
Okay, yeah, right. Jay Crowder got sent to Phoenix. So I'm not sure what you do there at the 4 spot, but then you have Bam. That's a nice little rotation, and then you're talking Duncan Robinson and Tyler Herro off your bench. Tyler Herro's been struggling a bit this year from a shooting perspective, only shooting 31% from the 3. Maybe him coming off the bench will actually help with his efficiency.
I think so.
In that case. So that could be something that kind of helps them out. But defensively, it certainly helps them on the perimeter, getting a guy like Oladipo, even if he's not quite the scorer that we thought he was after his first year in Indiana. He's still going to be a guy who can handle the ball, defend, and be a secondary scorer for Miami. So they're sitting in the 5 seed right now. They're 500, 22 and 22. It's pretty safe to say that they're not going to crack that top 3.
Yeah.
So, I mean, they could very well be back in the same situation that they were in last year when the 4 or 5 seed and still make a playoff run. Is this team capable now with Oladipo of challenging Brooklyn, Milwaukee, and Philly in the playoffs?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I think you have to say definitely Milwaukee, right? Listen, like the defense that this team is able to play, and granted, I think losing Jay Crowder does hurt them a lot on a defensive end, but they still have all of these athletes. They still have Bam. They still have Jimmy. And now you add Oladipo into that. From the defensive standpoint, they're going to be able to, quote unquote, build these walls against Giannis. Probably, I think that against the Sixers, that would be a good matchup for them too. I think the Nets are the one where you just look at it and you're like, well, they're just going to outgun them. Like, how can they not outgun them with KD and Kyrie? and Harden, kind of like unbelievable. I don't even think we've really processed how good that can be because they haven't all really been playing together that much because with the KD injury. So we're not even sure how good that's going to get. But I do think, they would definitely be the fourth team right now, and I might even still like them more than the Bucks just based on the track record we've seen with them.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I like them better than the Bucks, and they're playing really good basketball right now. Yeah. But I don't trust the Bucks as far as I can throw them until I see it in the postseason. That's just where we are with them.
Has to
be. So and I actually like some of the moves that they made this offseason, and I like the PJ Tucker trade, but like the Bucks are simply in the category of show me at this point. So
yeah, exactly.
I think Miami has set themselves up for some playoff success here. Probably going to have to address that power forward situation. Maybe Iguodala slides there. Remember, they did make a move for Ariza as well. Yeah. So maybe they go small and do Iguodala or Ariza there at the 4.
Well, buyout.
Right. Yep. They could address the buyout market. So we'll actually talk about a key piece that they could be adding there. They got Achua off the bench, who I really like as a backup 4 or 5 there. He's a good energy guy for them. So they've got a nice little roster there heading into the playoffs, and I'm hoping they fall to like the 6th seed. So my Sixers don't see them in the second round. I wouldn't, and we hold the 1 seed. Or if we do slip off the 1 seed, then they're okay to stay in that 4 or 5 range. I don't really want to see them in the playoffs. I'm not going to lie.
Well, and you mentioned the power forward, and we're going to talk about buyout, but there is one that could make a lot of sense.
Yes, absolutely. So before we get to that, 2 other significant trades that happen.
Yeah.
Rondo heading to the Clippers, and Lou Will headed back to his hometown in Atlanta. So before we discuss, Rondo to the Clippers, if you're Magic City's club owner.
Oh, man.
How much are you loving this trade?
Wow, this is the greatest thing that ever happened to me. I wish I would have bought stock in Magic City Strip Club yesterday. Now, we'll see. It's like I actually like the Lou Will to Atlanta piece for Atlanta, as the team who can possibly be competing.
Yeah.
Getting him away from Magic City to go to the games, though, that's where it becomes a problem. Like, are you going to get this guy in the gym and not at Magic City? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, listen, every stripper and bar owner in Atlanta should be celebrating this deal. All of you are getting like a 50% raise.
At least.
But in all seriousness, I do like the fit for Lou Will in Atlanta as well. Gives them some off the bench scoring. Now, I'm assuming they're going to have to stagger Trae Young in his minutes.
Yeah, right.
And they will not be on the court a lot, I'm assuming, because that seems like a nightmare defensively. In that case, but the Hawks, who have been underwhelming, adding a veteran scorer like Lou Williams can't hurt.
Yeah.
But to me, the bigger part of this deal is Rondo heading to the Clippers.
Oh yeah,
where I'm assuming he's going to be the starter there, right? Like he's certainly taking the place of Patrick Beverley, right?
Well, you know how I feel about Patrick Beverley, so I hope he takes his place. I think it helps them, right? I mean, and this is a guy who we saw last year in the finals, hitting huge threes, hitting step back threes, swinging around the key, and he's hitting threes from the wing. Like if he's that Rondo, if he's quote unquote playoff Rondo, it's going to be a huge upgrade for a team who needed that, for a team who needed not only a veteran presence to calm the locker room, it seems like Kawhi isn't going to be that guy. Seems like Kawhi or Paul George don't want to be that vocal leader. Rondo's happy to do that. And if he's playoff Rondo, he becomes a serviceable player as well. So I think if I'm the Lakers, and we're still doing this Lakers Clippers thing, but I think I hate to see him go to the Clippers.
Yeah, I certainly would for any team out in the West that plans on contending, because I honestly think he's the missing piece. When you look at the Clippers on paper, they should be like this really like dominant really good team, and they haven't been over the last 2 years in the regular season, postseason, and this regular season. They have not lived up to the hype that was there when they first signed Paul George and Kawhi Leonard. And the reason is because those guys aren't leaders.
Mm-hmm.
They're not. And it's simple as that. And then at their point guard spot, they did not have someone who could control the game. They did not have a guy who could say, hey, let's get into this. Let's run the offense here down stretch. Let's make sure we get this person a touch. Rondo's that guy. Even when he's not making shots, and you're going to need him to make shots to space the floor for Paul George and Kawhi. In the playoff, and somehow in the playoffs, he manages to do that. But even if he's not hitting shots, at bare minimum, he's giving you a vocal leader, a proven winner. He's got 2 championships now, and a veteran player who, gives them someone who can run this team.
Yep.
And I think that's an invaluable, that's a valuable thing that a lot of people might overlook. And we'll see how it works out. And then the other thing is that he plays defense. You're not sacrificing anything defensively by having him in your lineup. Rondo's going to defend. So you still keep, and he might arguably be a better defender than Patrick Beverley, because I don't think he's that great of a defender. But that's just me personally. Yeah. I think Rondo is an actual better defender, not someone who just claps in your face after he manages to get a deflection.
Yeah, and even though and even still on offense, even if he isn't a guy who, if he goes out and plays 25 minutes, even if he doesn't give you 12 to 15 points, which would probably be the ceiling for him, he's never going to do the wrong thing with the ball. He's never going to get in somebody else's way, right? Yep. And he's never going to take ill-advised shots. Patrick Beverley does those things. Rondo will not do those things. So I think that was what makes him so valuable too.
And then the last thing before we move on from Rondo that I think he also gives that we haven't talked about is pick and roll.
Yeah.
The pick and roll is one of the most popular things in today's NBA. There's a reason for it. It's because it works. And they didn't have anyone who could really run that, right? That was something we talked about the Lakers really not having last year, was that pick and roll type guard. And the Clippers didn't really have it either until now. Rondo's great in the pick and roll.
Yeah.
So him and Ibaka in pick and pop situations, I think could be pretty good for them. Especially in the playoffs when they need some floor spacing, things like that. They can find ways to get Rondo involved for sure. So good pickup for them. Last actual trade that went through that we'll talk about here a little bit. JJ Redick, gets traded to the Dallas Mavericks, a team not necessarily lacking for shooting, maybe more so than last year, but still a team that shoots a lot of threes and makes a lot of threes. But now you add JJ Redick to the mix. How are you feeling about this deal?
Well, I think of course, I like it for Dallas, right? I mean, when we think about, Dallas is one of these teams like Houston the last 2 years, who it's every shooter you can think of, get them on Dallas because Luka will find them, right? So it's I think it makes a ton of sense. JJ Redick moves really well, constantly, right? And the Mavs their offense feeds really well for that. So I think it makes a ton of sense now. JJ Redick's probably having his worst season maybe of his career, or at least until before the Orlando. That is not my cousin, but I appreciate it. So really before the Orlando peak happened, this was the worst he's been. He's not getting a ton of minutes, which I think actually New Orleans could use more minutes of his, and they should probably get Zion the ball more. But we're not talking about the Pelicans. But he helps this team, right? They lost this with Seth Curry, the Seth Curry Josh Richardson trade, which I think when it happened, we liked. And now looking back on it, we're well, they probably shouldn't have sacrificed that shooting, even if it helps on defense. And maybe we're looking back, maybe we're looking at this in the playoffs and saying, well, it's a good thing they traded for that Josh Richardson defense, right? So maybe it still might pan out. But JJ Redick helps replace that shooting you lose by trading Seth Curry. So I think it makes sense. The Pelicans are kind of an interesting. It's what are they trying to do? Not really sure. I was secretly fantasizing that they might trade Brandon Ingram at this deadline and just say, get out of the way. We're giving the keys to Zion, which I was kind of hoping that they did that. But, not a surprise that they didn't do that, and they're trying to figure it out. But, yeah, I think it makes sense for the Mavs.
I honestly, I think the Pelicans might just be like just taking any trade possible at this point. JJ Redick was rumored to be getting bought out as well. I think he just wanted to play for a contender, so they kind of just took anybody for him. But yeah, I don't really know what direction this Pelicans team is going in. But again, I echo your sentiment of JJ Redick heading to the Mavs, gives them a knockdown shooter, hopefully gives them a little more ball movement off the ball than what they've had before. So, maybe Luka's a little less ball dominant, and we see some better movement there. He's going to have to shoot it a little better than he has this year, and maybe he'll be motivated to do so on a team that has a chance of making the playoffs. So, we'll see how that goes for the Mavs. And then, so let's close out with our trade deadline winners and losers, and then we'll get into the buyout market after that. So, real quick, who are your winners? No, let's do losers first. Who's your losers from today's trade deadline?
The Lakers come to mind, and Lakers were a team who won the championship last year, so we're probably not thinking they need to do anything. But I would have liked to see them do something to try to fill this void until LeBron comes back. It almost seems like they really are just saying, we don't care what seed we are. We really don't care what seed we are. We're just going to get our guys back healthy, and we'll go toe-to-toe with anybody. I actually had heard that the Lakers offered Schroeder plus THD plus others for Kyle Lowry, and the Raptors said that's not enough. So they were trying, and I think they understand that there is a void there.
Yeah.
But they weren't able to do anything, so they're a loser.
Yeah, I would say so as well. And, I don't think they really have a ton of assets to give up regardless. And if that wasn't enough for Kyle Lowry, then, what else could you possibly give without ripping your team apart? And I think them putting THT in there was actually asking for a lot because he's been really good and I think has a lot of upside for them. So they do come out as a loser because they're going to play. They said Anthony Davis is out for at least another 2 weeks. So you're going without both LeBron and Anthony Davis for the next 2 weeks. And LeBron's expected to be out for 3 to 5 more weeks from when he got injured. So you could possibly be looking at a month of basketball without LeBron and at least 2 weeks without both of them. And even with AD, I don't know. Even if you have AD and no LeBron, I don't know how many games you win with this roster.
Right.
With that, because we've seen Anthony Davis led teams be awful. So, I don't know. We could see them drop pretty significantly here, man, because Portland and Denver both made moves that make them better, and they're 2 games and 2.5 games back from them. The Clippers got better today, so yeah. It's a grueling battle out west, and to not have your 2 best players for the next 2 to 5 weeks could be brutal for the Lakers. And I think seeding will matter most this year.
Think about how far they could fall really here. They're 2 games up on the Nuggets, and the Nuggets have been coming up strong. They add Aaron Gordon, right? The Blazers add Norman Powell. They've been good this year. The Mavs, who have been hot of late already. And now they're also adding JJ Redick. Lakers could find themselves in the 6-7 range. And if they find themselves in the 7 seed and they have to play a play-in game, can you imagine them in a play-in game only to play the Suns or the Clippers in the next round? They want to talk about last year being the hardest championship ever. LeBron said last year was the hardest championship. This would be the hardest championship ever if you had to play a play-in game and you had all these injuries. It's going to be tough.
Yeah, and honestly, if he did that, I don't want to hear anything about Michael Jordan being the GOAT.
Michael Jordan can kick rocks if LeBron wins.
I don't want to have that discussion. But yeah, it could be a pretty significant fallout for the Lakers.
I won't even know who Michael Jordan is if LeBron wins this championship. I don't want to never hear that name again. Oh, that bad owner of the Hornets? Oh, yeah, he sucks.
Yeah. But yeah, maybe Schroeder and Kuzma hold down and THT hold down the fort for the next couple of weeks. We'll see how that pans out for them. That was the only real loser that I had from today as
Yeah.
well. I don't think anyone else got significantly worse
Yeah.
or was hurt by the deadline.
Yeah, I mean, I think sorry, I almost gave a winner away, but I think the Kings I would call a loser for not doing a Harrison Barnes deal or a Buddy Hield deal.
Yeah.
I figured that they were going to try to do something. I didn't know if they were going to be trying to buy and be one of these teams who tries to make a push to get into that playing game, or they're going to be a seller. But I thought they would do something, and it seemed like they weren't. I don't know. That gives me a sense of no direction from them. We talked about that with Toronto.
Right, yeah, and they had discussed Bagley was on the market. I didn't hear any rumors about him today. Not that a ton of teams would be checking for him, but and he's not a bad player. He's just like, what does he give you if you're a contending team? But yeah. So let's talk about winners then. Who was your winners from today's trade deadline?
Well, I think obviously we have to say we've already talked about Denver as a big winner. I would also go with the Celtics. A guy, Evan Fournier, that is really what they needed. They needed a wing who they can bring off the bench and can hold them over when Tatum and Brown aren't in the game. And they were missing that. Gordon Hayward turned out to be a lot more important than we thought, just from he wasn't as good as he wasn't playing as good last year as he is right now with Charlotte, but he could at least hold them together on offense when Tatum and Brown weren't in the game and move the ball and do the right things. I think Fournier is a much less version of that, but he's a guy who can at least get hot from time to time. You bring him off the bench and he's a spark, and he energizes the team who desperately needs energy right now. So I would have the Celtics as a winner.
Agreed. I did like the Fournier pickup for a very small price. Jeff Teague was actually the player who was sent back to Orlando. However, he will not report this to Orlando. They're going to apparently waive him. So he's going to be a guy out there in the buyout market. Which we'll get to. So they did, however, end up trading Daniel Tice. Yeah. So I guess the game winner he missed last night so got his bags packed for him. I kid. But he ended up getting traded as well. And they're bringing in Mo Wagner, who was traded to the Bulls earlier today, and now getting sent to the Celtics. So I'm assuming Wagner's going to fill that 5 spot, and he's a pretty solid stretch 5, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, they still have Tristan. I think they're also saying, okay, we really like Robert Williams. We're going to increase his minutes probably. And then you have Grant Williams, who Brad Stevens seems to like, even though he's not. I don't think he's that
I don't understand Grant Williams. I'm assuming Wagner's going to take his minutes.
Maybe,
right?
Yeah. So I think you had to kind of move Tice for the luxury tax reasons anyway. And probably this was a good opportunity to do that and get Robert Williams more minutes anyway. Yeah.
So good day for the Celtics. My winners for today, I think it's we definitely talked about Denver, but I think the Clippers were the biggest winners from today. I love the Rondo deal. I also loved what Portland did. Like, I think this Norman Powell trade is incredibly underrated. I was actually kind of hoping, because the Sixers were in talks for him as well, if they couldn't get Lowry. I was hoping that he was the one that we were going to get over Kyle Lowry, because I think he's a better fit than Kyle Lowry is anyway. Right. So I was hoping for him. I think he's going to be an excellent fit out there in Portland, and will help them in that brutal Western Conference. And then my last winner, I would say, are my Sixers. I think there's something to be said about not overpaying for older players, man. And I'm going to give them credit for.
You're just dumping on Lowry. You're just dumping on him.
No. Here's the thing: if we had got Kyle Lowry and only gave up like Maxey in a first rounder, I would have taken that deal. Mm-hmm. Like, I wanted Kyle Lowry, but they were just asking for way too much, in my opinion. And the same thing with James Harden. Like, I'll take James Harden, but we're not going to wage our entire future for James Harden or our entire bench for James Harden. And I'm glad that Daryl Morey took that approach. Like, we're not going to overpay or we're not gonna pull a deal because we feel like we need another piece,
right,
and kind of gut our bench or our future with these young players that we have. Because if you think about it, we already gave up picks for Danny Green just to get Horford's contract off of the books. So and I think we gave up picks for Seth Curry. So it's like there has to be a line drawn there. The Sixers are playing well. We're without Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid. We're still the number 1 seed in the East right now. I don't think the pressure was there for us to pull the trigger on this deal, and I think that makes the Sixers a winner today, in my opinion.
I cannot wait until they break your heart in May. I cannot wait until they break your heart.
Well, you know what? Here's the thing: if they do, then we'll sign Kyle Lowry in free agency for 10 to 12 million.
You're right.
And then we'll make our something. Well, he'll take a hometown discount. He'll come home to Philly,
maybe.
Playing back in Wells Fargo once again.
Yeah.
We'll get him at a much cheaper price than what the Raptors wanted for him, and then next year we'll win it all. So it's all good. It'll work out.
Yeah. I have one more winner, and I'll be quick with it. And it's the Magic, actually, who I think probably aren't going to get enough credit because they were the seller on all of these deals today. I think actually they're deals that make sense for the direction of the franchise. And if they can get, just say they get lucky and they get a Cade Cunningham and you pair him with a healthy Fultz and a Cole Anthony, that backcourt is going to be serious. So I think I would count them as a winner.
Yeah, I agree. And honestly, I don't even think they'd have to get Cade to win out on this.
Yeah. That would be ideal.
It would certainly be ideal. But Evan Mobley is a good young prospect. And the other thing is that I think we're not really factoring in is one, Jonathan Isaac's hurt. So when he comes back, he's going to have increased minutes with Vucevic gone and Aaron Gordon gone. Yeah. And then Mo Bamba, you get to find out what Mo Bamba really is with increased minutes. Listen, I don't love him either because he's so frail. Yeah. But he has tremendous upside as a stretch 5 rim protector. Sometimes play time is what these guys need, to build the confidence that they need to play in the league. So if Mo Bamba is anything, now is the time that you will get to, fairly evaluate him. So Unleash Mo Bamba is going to be the new trend in Orlando, and we'll see how that works out for them. And then if he doesn't, then go get Evan Mobley.
Good luck with Mo Bamba. I'll be grabbing Mobley if available.
Yeah, definitely. All right, so as the trade deadline goes by, the next most important thing for contending teams is the buyout market. Mm-hmm. We had this, I think we mentioned earlier, LaMarcus Aldridge has already been bought out by the Spurs. They paid $5.8 million to buy him out. We're likely seeing Jabari Parker get waived, and possibly some other Jeff Teague is going to be entering the buyout market here. So let's just talk about LaMarcus Aldridge, because we had kind of hinted at him earlier. What's the best destination for LaMarcus Aldridge, and what team you want to see pick him?
Yeah. So I hinted at it. I think this is the one you were hinting at too. Is Miami makes the most sense, right? I mean they're in need of that power forward. They won't ask him to do too much on defense, which we know is not really his thing, especially at this stage of his career. Yeah. But I think it makes the most sense, and for him to go to a team who has a legitimate chance to win a title.
Yeah. Agreed. And even if that's not this year, I think, next year they get back in the mix, they stay healthy, they could compete again. But yeah, I think he's a perfect fit. He's a stretch 4. He stretches range out to the 3-point line now. You'll be able to hide him defensively because you have Bam, and obviously other good defenders on that roster. He can even move to the 5 and play as a 5 for you for some minutes. So I think Miami's the perfect fit for him. I'd also, I'm going to get a little greedy here, but I'd like to see him in Philly.
Oh, brother!
I think he'd be a great backup power forward. I think he'd mesh well. I think he'd actually mesh well with Dwight in that bench unit, and he'd fit well with Ben Simmons. As a stretch 5 off the bench. So I think he'd be a nice fit for us as well. maybe that's asking for a bit much.
I'm sick of you. I'm never letting you have another good team again. This is crazy. You want everybody now.
You know what else? The other destination I think he should strongly consider.
Yeah,
Milwaukee. I think he'd be a really nice fit for Milwaukee. And like, obviously you need a stretch big with Giannis, even though I think Giannis should be the 5. That's a whole other conversation. But you need a stretch big if you're not going to play Giannis at the 5. And I like Brook Lopez, but I also kind of hate how many minutes he plays. So
right, and he's not LaMarcus Aldridge.
Right, he's not LaMarcus Aldridge. I think LaMarcus Aldridge is just better than him. So, it is what it is. So I think that could be another good destination for him as well.
Yeah, I mean, I don't hate that. Obviously, for him, I think, obviously he's going to want to go to a contender. And if he wants to stay in the West, and I'm not doing the math on who's got the buyout cash, but like a team like Portland, to go back to Portland, how cool would that be, right? To go back to Portland and try to do this playoff run with them. I don't know if that's even an option. So don't hold me to that one. Right. But I think Miami is the one that I know that they have room, and I know that they'd probably be looking for a guy like him. Yeah,
agreed. Anybody else in the buyout market that you'd like to see a contending team pick up?
Yeah, definitely. Actually, I think one, obviously Drummond comes to mind, and I think the Lakers are probably in the market for him. Yeah. The fact that the Cavs aren't going to get anything for Andre Drummond, they didn't get anything for Kevin Love, kind of hilarious as well.
Yeah.
So I'll be interested to see where he goes if it's the Lakers. Also, like Otto Porter Jr. is a guy who I think as a wing, and if you're looking for guys like I think like the Celtics could still use another wing who can be serviceable off the bench for them. And a lot of teams could use a guy like Otto Porter, even the Lakers, especially in a time like right now where they could use a guy. So I think he's another guy I'd be watching for as an underrated buyout guy.
Yeah, agreed. I certainly like Andre Drummond. I think the Knicks were flirting with the idea of Andre Drummond as well.
I don't like that, though. I hate that.
Yeah.
I like Mitchell Robinson.
I like Mitchell Robinson, too. I'm all in. I agree with you there. I like Mitchell Robinson over Andre Drummond.
Yeah.
He's a better rim protector. He's more mobile.
Well, and what are you trying to do? It's like, we talked about this before. It's like, do you go for that 6, 7, 8 seed, or do you think about the future? And it's like, I think I would build around Mitchell Robinson.
I agree with you there. Anywhere but the Nets, honestly. Like, anywhere but the Nets.
The Nets are going to be so interesting, and Blake hasn't played for them yet, I don't think. Right? Am I wrong about that? I don't think he's played for them yet.
Yes, he has.
Has he? Okay.
He hasn't dunked since 2019, and his first bucket as a net was a dunk.
Well, that's not surprising.
So he was just phoning it in Detroit, man.
Yeah, so I wonder if he's going to be someone who's actually serviceable or in like a closing 5. I hope that Drummond doesn't go to them. I'm not sure that they would want a guy like Drummond. I mean, he helps with that closing 5 problem, right? Because DeAndre Jordan's not that guy.
Right.
But I don't think Drummond's someone you want in your closing 5 really either.
No, because he can't make free throws.
Right.
Yeah, so I agree with you there as well. All right, so before we move on to the Warriors comments, MVP update. I mean, everybody who was in the race is hurt.
Right.
Except for one, Nikola Jokic. So is he your front runner now?
He's definitely the front runner right now. He kind of has to be. It's actually interesting, though. Like, we should address the fact that, like, Giannis is having the same season again that he's had the last 2 years.
Yeah.
There's no chance he's going to win, though, right? Nobody's going to vote for him a third time because they're like, well, we saw in the playoffs it doesn't work, so we can't vote for you now. Like, really, if we're doing it just based on, like, if we were saying we're not taking that bias into it, he'd probably be winning this thing because he's been that good. But I think Jokic is the favorite right now, probably the far and away favorite right now, just because of health. I mean, I think it definitely was Embiid. It definitely was Embiid until he got hurt. And then when he got hurt, it shifted to LeBron. And now that LeBron's hurt, and it seems like he's going to be out for upwards of a month, it's probably going to end up with Jokic.
Yeah, I'm hoping Embiid comes back quick enough so it doesn't like slip out of his grasp. I have some money invested in that.
Oh,
So
brother.
I think I got him at like plus 700 or plus 600, something like that. So
Yeah.
very, very nice returns on that investment. If he comes back healthy, I think he can still kind of get a grasp on it. But like, Jokic is putting up the numbers.
Yep.
He's probably, if we're just assuming that the Lakers are going to be bad for the next few weeks, he's probably going to move them up from the 5 seed to at least the 4 seed, possibly 3rd.
Yep.
So like, that's if they play good and with them adding Aaron Gordon, if they are better like we think they're going to be, I think he could really put a stranglehold on this thing just by default.
Yeah, I mean, and listen, like, by default, he's gonna ball out this year, right? He's gonna put up insane numbers. It's not like he's not having a great year and he doesn't deserve it, because he most definitely does, right? He's averaging 27, 11, and 8.5. Like,
yeah, right.
He definitely deserves MVP. Can I give you some dark horses though?
Can I guess one?
Yeah, good.
Chris Paul.
No, you know what? I like the Chris Paul idea, right? Because they are surging. They're going to end up being the 2 seed. I think that probably if it was going to be a Sun, which I don't think it's going to be a Sun, it'd probably be Booker.
But isn't that crazy though? Is that not a single Sun or Jazz player is in this discussion, and they're the top 2 seeds in the toughest conference in the NBA?
Well,
isn't that ridiculous?
and does that tell us that they're phony? Does that tell us that when it comes to playoff time that they're not going to have that guy? But I think the Suns might though.
Yeah, I trust the Suns in the playoffs more than I trust the Jazz.
Unfortunately, I do too. And even though Donovan Mitchell has kind of shown that he can be, a quasi guy. If you ask Shaq, he's not that guy. But he's shown that he can be something in the playoffs. But I think I still trust the Suns more because of Booker, but also with the steady hand of a Chris Paul and their team, who could probably be in this buyout market. But yeah.
Go ahead.
So anyway, I was gonna give a guy, Luka. Actually, Luka, because if you look at this, first of all, like, Luka has been unreal, right? So the numbers are insane as they were last year. If you look at them in the standings, before the year, we probably said you have to be at least the 3 seed to win the MVP.
Probably.
Right? I think probably that dropped to 5 seed with all of these injuries.
Yeah.
Right.
Definitely.
So all of these injuries make it now so we're like, fuck it. There's not, excuse my language. There's not one true MVP.
Yeah.
Let's give it to this guy because he has amazing stats. And also, like, he's going to have these amazing stats. Their record could, they could creep all the way up to a 4 or 3 seed. It would not be crazy at all, especially how hot they've been, plus adding JJ Redick. So if he keeps creeping up, we might look at it at the end of the season and say, yeah, the Nuggets are the 3 seed, but the Mavs are the 4 seed. Luka's got better stats. Let's give it to Luka. I wouldn't be surprised at all.
You know who I think should get more MVP love?
Who?
Dame Dollar.
Yeah.
I think he's been great for Portland this year. He's hit a massive amount of huge shots for them. And really sitting in the 6th seed, I think is, and again, with assuming the Lakers might bottom out a little bit here, they could do the same thing as Dallas, right? And make a little push here, get their seeding a little bit better. I think Dame could be in that dark horse. I'd probably have him 2nd in my rankings right now if we just if we're taking out all the injured guys. I think I'd have him in 2nd.
Guys?
Yeah, we take out all the injured guys. He's like behind Jokic. I think I'd have him right. I think I'd have him a distant 2nd to Jokic.
I think I have to put Giannis there. The numbers are
fair.
Insane, and they're going to be one of the top 2 seeds probably, or 3 seeds in the East.
Yeah.
So what about Harden?
That's what I was literally going to ask you the same thing.
I'm asking you. You got to answer it first.
All right. Well, here's my thing. It's hard to really, it's hard to judge Harden because he's been incredible. Like, don't get me wrong, for the Nets, and they've been playing a lot without KD. But like if I'm projecting for the rest of the regular season, like when all 3 of those eventually they're going to have to play together. I don't know if they're like purposely not playing together so that they can increase their numbers or whatever it is. I don't know. it seems like one of them is not healthy or playing at some point. It's weird, but eventually all three of them are going to have to be on the court together. And when that happens is going to be like during the most crucial stretch of an MVP race, right? So like, and when people are watching the Nets with Harden, Kyrie, and KD, they're going to be like, dude, this isn't fair. So they're not going to, that's not going to compel voters to James Harden. Yeah. So like, unless KD is going to sit out the rest of the regular season and Kyrie is going to be like in and out of the lineup, I don't see a path to James Harden winning MVP, despite how great he's playing.
I agree.
And I think he's playing. The numbers don't say it, but I think he's playing better basketball than he did in Houston. Like he's playing better winning basketball than he did in Houston. So this is not like James Harden hate, from me, as it might have been when he was in Houston. It's just a matter of like down the stretch, those three guys are going to be playing together, and it's just going to be to the point where it's like you can't be MVP with Kyrie and KD on your team. I'm sorry. It's just you're not. There's no way you can be the most valuable player in the NBA playing with those two guys.
I agree 100%. And I wouldn't bet on Harden being the MVP because I think KD's going to come back, right, at some point.
And he's still the best player on that team, if you ask me.
And he's going to be the best player on that team. It'll be interesting to see how those two mess. And you add in Kyrie Irving, gosh, they're going to be good.
Yeah. All right. So before we move off the NBA, apparently the Warriors this week had lots to say. Steve Kerr was on a podcast, not our podcast, but on some lesser podcasts than ours, talking about how he enjoyed last year when they were abysmal more than the prior year, which was KD's final season in Golden State. Now he doesn't. I listened to the podcast. Yes, I did listen to the podcast just to get context, because he came right out and said, like, this guy took my comments out of context, and he did.
He was mad.
Yeah, he was pretty upset about it, and he does not once mention KD, and he doesn't really say anything that was a slight to KD. Really, what he was comparing was the energy and the vibe around the team from last year. Even though they were losing a lot of games, they had a ton of young guys who showed up to the gym and were playing hard, giving it their all. And like, that's really all that you can ask for versus the previous year. It's been well documented, all the drama that they went through, Draymond cursing out KD in a huddle, and then, the whole mess of problems that they had there, all the injuries, a fifth straight finals trip. Like, there's just a lot of stress that goes into that. And he was like, it was kind of nice to just show up in a gym and just have everybody be happy and just focusing on getting better every day. Like, that was just nice. And then someone had to take it to Twitter, took the quote of what he said and said, put KD's final year in parentheses. I thought it's just, to me, it was kind of gross how that the person who wasn't even on the podcast did that, and I can see why he was upset.
Yeah, and also, like, even if we said, like, okay, he's not talking about KD, and I honestly believe that he wasn't talking about KD, but like, if you just looked at it like objectively, right, and you're like, okay, like, coaching a bad but young team is more fun than we actually give it credit for. I actually think there is a very rewarding process to coaching a team that goes from very little and improves. Like, I think that we shouldn't downplay like actually the process of that and how much a guy who's a competitor and wants to compete, like how much he enjoyed that process where he's had so much success since he began coaching. You wondered how he would handle a team like that. And you know what? It proves that he loved it because he's a competitor. I think you can probably relate to that well. Like, when you can seeing your team improve is the single best thing about coaching, in my opinion.
Yes,
probably.
absolutely.
Right? And when you start with a really bad team, you're able to see a lot of times a bigger improvement. Even if the best teams, you don't see as big of improvement, but because they were already so good and then they improved so much under you, you're able to create this championship, right? Or whatever. Like with the really bad teams, like there's such an improvement that is a very rewarding process for a coach. So I don't necessarily think that it was crazy or out of line at all to say that last year's team was more fun to coach. And then also when you compare that to that team in 18-19, fifth straight finals run, exhausted, they're fighting, right? Like there's bickering going on. You get to a place where guys don't want to stay in the box that they have previously been put on because of the success that they had.
Right.
It would almost be crazy to think that team wouldn't have problems, right?
Yeah,
if they didn't have problems, that would be crazy. So I think, like, of course, you go through this experience, you get exhausted, and then you get a chance to refresh with something new and exciting and an opportunity to really see guys improve. Like, yeah, I would take that too as a coach. So I think it's crazy that they made it about KD. I think that's just, that's a reach. That's a reach.
Yeah.
I think it was, but I don't blame him at all for choosing that.
Yeah, and it's just it's an indictment on social media culture, clickbait, things like that. To me, that's not journalism. It's not fair to do stuff like that and take it out of context. Because then ultimately, like KD's like super sensitive. So like now there's a conversation that maybe needs to be had there. You know what I mean? And it's just like, well, I don't know. I thought it was super unfair. And he opened up his press conference talking about addressing that before he even took a question. And I was just like, he was not happy about that. And after I listened to it, I was like, he has every right to be to be unhappy with what this guy did on Twitter to that, comment. It was just,
and even like to do it to KD, who everyone knows is, you don't want to say super sensitive or whatever, but like he is hypersensitive to these type of comments, and he's also known and liable to respond, right? So is that why you're posting this?
That's exactly why you're posting it. He's responding to that.
Exactly. And you're trying to get that response to make this something more than it is.
Yeah, gross.
That's fake news. Very bad. Fake news.
So then Draymond follows it up and calls himself the best defender ever. So just a great for those reporters out there in the Bay Area, they have much to write about. Where's your stance on Draymond claiming he's the best defender ever? Are you agreeing? Is he crazy? Is he in the range?
Well, I'll say this. He's not as crazy as people are making him out to be right now.
I don't think he is either.
He's up there, dog. He is up there. If you look at some of these advanced statistics, and I know those don't tell the whole picture, he is right at the top of the list when it comes to these defensive metrics. And then also when you look at the actual impact on the court, guys, we're talking about a team that won 73 games. Okay, their best player, doesn't play a lick of defense, right? Draymond is a guy who was in charge of that. Like he was the enforcer on that team. He was also like the defensive coordinator on that team in a way. So I think he actually doesn't get enough credit for the defensive impact. Those teams were the best defensive teams in the league. If we remember, they were number one defenses in 15-16 and 14-15 whenever they made those finals runs. That didn't start to decline until they had to sign KD, and then the money got tight. They couldn't sign the same defenders. But before that, in the first two runs, they were the number one defensive teams in the league. And Draymond was the biggest reason why. So I don't know if he's the best defender ever. That's a tough debate. You start to talk about guys like Olajuwon. Of course, Mr. Cooper says Bill Russell, and we appreciate Mr. Cooper's comment. He's the man. And even, you talk about Scottie Pippen or David Robinson. So he's in that upper echelon, though, is all I'm trying to say. And I think he's probably getting more hate than he deserves right now.
Yeah, like I think he's top. I think he's just with just spitballing. He's top 7 in that discussion.
Sure. And
if we're talking about the most versatile defenders of all time, he's top 3. Like to where you're talking about a guy who can guard all 5 positions. Granted, you're not going to put him on your point guard, but when he has to switch onto a guard, you're not thinking, oh, Draymond Green's getting baked right here. He might, but like you're not automatically thinking Draymond Green's getting cooked right here when he has to switch on to guards. We've seen him lock guards up.
Yeah.
And for someone who's 6'7", he's an excellent rim protector. Like we don't give him enough credit for the way he protects the rim, and it's because he's not ever like a league leader in shot blocking, right? Like Rudy Gobert, Dwight Howard in his prime, like those guys, right? But really, what it's more like, he's mastered verticality. I don't know that I've seen anyone who is as good as him just in contesting shots at the rim with verticality. And he's 6'7", and granted he has a long wingspan, but at 6'7", someone who protects the rim like that, there's a lot to be said there. And Tony Allen was like, well, who did you lock? And it's like, that's not where Draymond's defensive expertise really are focused on. Is like, oh, Draymond guard, our best, wing player. Like, he's the captain of the defense. Like, I don't know that I've ever seen this guy miss a defensive rotation. I'm sure he has, but like, it's very rare that he's not in the right position and place on defense.
And maybe you could say that, and this would be an argument too, that like 75% of defense in the NBA in 2021 is giving a shit. And he gives a shit almost every night, right? And he's able to do things because of it. Also, I would say, just shout out to my guy, Mr. Cooper, who is listening here. If you want to talk about wing defenders, and a guy who does not get mentioned ever is actually Dr. J. Dr. J might be the best wing defender of all time. If you want to dive deep on YouTube, you can find some videos of him just locking guys up. So he doesn't get talked about enough as a wing defender, and maybe you give the wing defenders more credit than the forwards. But I actually think Draymond is a wing defender who plays down low, who's able to bully with guys, but also do everything you can from a defensive leadership perspective.
Yeah, you're bringing up Dr. J. You might get me disowned, and you might be my dad's new son. He's a Sixers fanatic, and he loves Dr. J. So he has Russell, Rodman, and Green in his top three. I think that's fair. And maybe he'll add Dr. J after hearing this. We'll see. But I think he's up there in the discussion. People were like saying that he was talking crazy. I don't think it was crazy at all that he put himself in that stratosphere. And like, what else is he supposed to say? Like, I don't think I'm the best defender ever. I think these guys are better than me. Like, no athlete ever says stuff like that. So like, what do you expect these guys to say? I don't know why people overreact to these comments all the time. And
if we think about like the past like decade to 15 years of NBA basketball, like who are the two defenders we think about? Like, it's Draymond and Kawhi probably.
Yeah. And maybe Rudy Gobert.
Yeah,
he's got a defensive player of the year. That's his claim to fame. And maybe if we go back a little bit further, I guess he falls in the 15-year range. Dwight had a stranglehold on defensive player of the year for a while, but like
that was a long time ago.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like other than that, like who else is really in that discussion? So like he has the right to throw himself in that category. All right, so that's all we have for NBA topics. We're going to close out today's show with a little bit of NCAA tournament talk.
Yeah.
By far the wildest NCAA tournament. There's been more upsets than ever before in this NCAA tournament. Just in this Sweet 16, we have a 12, we have an 11, 12, 15 seed, and another 11 seed. So two 11s, a 12 seed, and a 15 seed in the Sweet 16. It's something we've never seen before. Is this tournament making any sense to you at all? Or
yes.
We had a lot of
sense. It's making perfect sense if you listen to the All In podcast, people. Guys, we gave you the keys. Okay.
Yeah, we definitely did.
We told you Ohio was going to beat Virginia. We told you that Abilene Christian was going to beat Texas. And we told you that Loyola Chicago would be in the Sweet 16 right now, guys. I hope you were listening to us and taking us seriously. But, maybe you will from now on. Who knows? People make mistakes, but it's okay.
We didn't have Oral Roberts in our Sweet 16, but we did tell you that Ohio State was a little fraudulent.
We told you. And what did we tell you about Dwayne Washington? Yeah.
Oh, boy, he stunk it up. Stunk it up. And I was watching that game with my dad and my brother. And my other older brother was in the group messaging us, and we were just talking about how bad Dwayne Washington was in that game. And we talked about him prior, so there was no surprise that
we talked about
he
Iowa
really struggled. Yeah, Iowa went down. despite Luka Garza having an incredible game, Oregon took care of them. Their guard. I didn't like their guard play. That's why I had them losing in the Sweet 16. They lost a round earlier than what I expected. Syracuse is probably the biggest surprise to me because they were pretty trash. Like, let's be honest, they were not very good coming into the tournament. And Buddy Boeheim's caught fire.
Well, yeah, Buddy Boeheim, and the zone is just such a hit and miss thing where if you play a team who can't figure it out,
yep,
they can't figure it out. You know
Especially,
what I mean? You kind of throw your hands up in the air sometimes.
And you know what? It's like, especially when it comes to NCAA tournament, where you don't have a ton of time to prepare for that.
Absolutely.
And you haven't seen a zone all year because hardly anyone runs it, and when they do run it, it's for spurts, not 40 minutes like Syracuse does. So, yeah, I mean, it just seems like even when Syracuse is like at their worst, they make a run. And when they do actually get into the tournament, they make a run because of that zone. And if they have enough offense, it'll get you by. But let's focus on this Sweet 16.
Yes.
So we're going to give ourselves a second chance with the bracket. So we reset and we're going to pick Sweet 16 all the way through. Now, next week, we'll reevaluate these picks, which will be before the Final Four starts. So we'll see how correct we were. Yep. So we'll start with Saturday's games. First on the slate is Loyola Chicago and Oregon State. Who are you taking in this one?
Oh, you already know I'm going with my boys, Loyola Chicago. They proved it. They're one of the best teams in the country. They've got the mid-major Jokic on their team, okay? and I think they're going to keep going. So I'll be quick. I'm going with Chicago. I
am also taking Loyola Chicago here. I think, they're one of the most disciplined teams I've ever seen. Like, they on both ends of the floor, they really clamped Illinois down. Desumu looked lost against Loyola Chicago. Yes, they locked him down, and they did an excellent job on Kofi Cockburn and limiting him as much as they could, and really attacking him on the other end and pick and rolls and dribble handoffs. They exposed him. So I really like this Loyola Chicago team. I do have them advancing here. Next up, my boys, the Villanova Wildcats, who are shot the lights out against North Texas, taking on a very good Baylor team. Who do you have moving on in this one?
Baylor's my national champion. They were before the bracket started. They still are, so I got to stick with them all the way through here.
I am going to go with Villanova.
Oh, brother.
I think Villanova has – they're hot right now, man. And in a year of upsets, year of upsets – I'm going to rock with the Wildcats here. I don't know. I don't have any logic behind it, but they're shooting the ball well. They're moving the ball well, and they seem to have figured it out without Colin. I'm going to pick Villanova to pull off the upset here against Baylor. A little bit of a homer pick.
The amount of Philadelphia bias on this podcast is out of control.
All right. So next up, Oral Roberts plays Arkansas, the 3 seed in the South region. Does Oral Roberts' Cinderella story come to an end here?
Yes, it does. And Arkansas's defense is the reason. We saw this against Colgate in the first round where it seemed like they were going to be able to play with Arkansas. Arkansas said, no, put the clamps on against a very good offensive team in Colgate. I think the similar story here where maybe Oral Roberts hangs around and then Arkansas turns on the clamps and shuts them down.
I agree with you there. Arkansas defensively shuts down Oral Roberts and moves on to the Elite Eight. And then to cap off Saturday's games is Houston versus Syracuse. I think this one could get very interesting. Who you got in this one?
I'm going to go with Houston. I still think that, eventually this Syracuse thing has to end with the zone. And Houston's the team who can shoot, and that helps to beat the zone. So I'll go Houston here. Agreed.
I'm also going to take Houston there as well. So then the rest of the Sweet 16 closes out on Sunday. Gonzaga versus Creighton. Creighton can get hot.
Yes.
But obviously Gonzaga is one of the best well-constructed teams in the country. Who you got in this one?
I've still got Gonzaga here. Creighton's had a nice run here. I think that they're a team who wouldn't lose to an Ohio, right? They would beat the teams that they're better than with a guard like Zagorowski. So I I think Creighton is a solid team, but Gonzaga is just better than them, and Creighton isn't built to beat teams who are just better than them. So I'm going Gonzaga.
Agreed. I'm going to take Gonzaga there as well. Florida State, Michigan. I think this one's going to be a great one. Who you got in this one?
Florida State, a guy who we, for the last 4 years, should be talking about more, and now everyone's going to be talking about him and saying this, so they're going to want to talk about him less probably. But the guy we should have been talking about more the past 3 years is Leonard Hamilton.
Yes, sir.
The coach of Florida State, and I think that they advance here.
Yeah, I love what he's doing down there. They have length, athleticism, ball handling. They've got enough shooting. But I think defensively they're going to bottle up Michigan. I do. Yeah. And without Isaiah Livers, Michigan's kind of been reliant on Eli Brooks having some big games. And I love Eli Brooks. He's from my hometown, York, PA. But this is, Spring Grove grad. And I love seeing him have success. I really do. But I don't think this Florida State matchup is one that favors him. This is a very athletic team. There's times where they run Scotty Barnes at the point, and he's 6'9", long, athletic. And I think that could be an issue for Michigan, who has a smaller backcourt. So I'm going to go with Florida State. I think defensively, without Isaiah Livers, they're going to struggle a little bit. Michigan's going to struggle to score, and Florida State will advance to the Elite Eight. Alabama taking on UCLA. We told you guys that the 11 seed who gets that playing game always makes a run, and here's UCLA in the Sweet 16. Do they have enough to get past Alabama, though?
No, they don't. And Alabama is a team I'm very high on. I have them in the national championship game. I don't think UCLA is a huge problem, and I think they'll get through easily.
I also am going to take Alabama here. And then to close out the Sweet 16, we've got Oregon and USC. Pac-12 matchup. Who you got in this one?
USC, another one that we were dead right about, and that was Evan Mobley and USC, and I'm going to keep them moving on here.
Agreed. All right, so we're going to stay in the West. Gonzaga, USC. Who you got?
Yeah, I think this is where it ends for USC, though, and Gonzaga is just a little bit too much, the guard play. And I got Gonzaga in the Final Four.
So Alabama, Florida State in the East.
You agree with that?
Oh, yes. I'm taking Gonzaga. Sorry.
Okay.
Gonzaga over USC. Then we have Alabama and Florida State in the East region.
I've got Alabama here. I still think the firepower is so much for them, and they've shown that they can really turn it on defense in spurts. So I'll go Alabama.
I'm going to disagree. I'm going to take Florida State. And in my bracket, I had Alabama beating Michigan, but after seeing these first two rounds, I'm taking Florida State this time around, and I got them going to the Final Four. I love their length and athleticism, so I'm going to take Florida State there.
Definitely.
Baylor, for you, you have Baylor versus Arkansas. Who are you taking in that one?
Baylor. I got to be Baylor. I got them the whole way.
Yep. So I have Arkansas Villanova. I'm going to take Arkansas there. So the Arkansas gets into the Final Four over my Nova boys. And then last we have Loyola Chicago versus Houston. Both of us have them. Who you got in that matchup?
I got Chicago. I love this team. I got them in the Final Four.
I agree. I'm going to take Loyola Chicago in the Final Four as well. So you have Gonzaga, Alabama, Baylor, Loyola Chicago.
Yep.
Correct?
Yep.
I have Gonzaga, Florida State, Arkansas, Loyola Chicago. So Gonzaga versus Alabama. Who you got?
Alabama.
Got Alabama.
I got Alabama, yeah.
I'm going to take the Zags here over Florida State. I think their run comes to an end. They have too much shooting and spacing and guard play. And then you have –
I got Baylor.
Sorry, it was Baylor and
Chicago.
Loyola Chicago. You have Baylor. You have them winning it all.
Yeah, I think they're just a little bit too much for the Chicago team that I really like.
I'm going to take Loyola Chicago over Arkansas.
Wow.
So Loyola Chicago and Gonzaga in my national championship. That's a ratings dream, right?
Yeah.
So you have Alabama and Baylor. You have Baylor as your national champion, as you said.
Correct.
I'm going to take Gonzaga to win it all. First perfect season.
Wow.
Since I don't even remember. I think it was UCLA was the last, or I'm sorry, Indiana in the 70s to do it. They're just so well constructed, man. The spacing they have, Jalen Suggs, and Drew Timme in the paint. And then they have the best shooter in the country, arguably, in Corey Kispert. I think just offensively, they're just too good. I think the only team that can really play with them is Baylor. And since I have a weird feeling that Nova might knock Baylor out, that's where I see Gonzaga coming out with the chip. But I wouldn't be surprised if it's not going to be. If Baylor gets past Villanova here, I think they can get to the final, and that would be probably the game to watch. Those are the two best constructed teams in the tournament.
I agree 100%. I mean, Gonzaga is probably the roster and the team that I like the most. I still just have my reservations about them winning that big game. But yeah, I mean, as far as the team goes, you can't argue with the guys they've got.
Yeah, not at all. So that wraps it up for today's episode. We went a little longer than expected, but we appreciate you guys staying tuned with us here today. Again, if you're watching on YouTube, make sure you guys are hitting that subscribe button. And then, we appreciate everyone who showed up in the comments today. You guys showed up and showed out. So we want to thank you guys for tuning into the live. If you can help us with sharing the episode on your social media feeds, that would be great. For those of you who stuck around on the audio version, again, make sure you guys are leaving ratings, subscribing, things like that, reviews, things like that. And make sure you guys hit us up on social media, on Twitter at all_in_pod. You can find us on Facebook, All In Network. Give us suggestions, things you want to hear from us on the show. Obviously, we do this for you guys. So if you have suggestions, things you guys want us to talk about, make sure you let us know on social media, and we'll make sure that we talk about your topic on the show. Mike, any last thoughts for the viewers today?
Yeah, I mean, you hit everything pretty well there, guys. Make sure you are doing the reviews. Let your friends know about us. Share us on Twitter at all_in_pod. And we did go over. It's funny, we were prepping for the episode, and you were like, you sent me an agenda. You're like, you think we should add stuff? I was like, we're going to talk about the NBA trade deadline. Too long.
Yeah.
Let's keep what we got, and I'm glad we did. So, yeah, it was a good episode. It was a good episode there, bro. We'll be back next Thursday.
Yes. Next week, we'll see you guys again. Stay tuned. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the All In Podcast, and see you guys next week.
Peace.